in this episode of the Critical Oxygen Podcast. Once you start to realize, hey, I'm probably not going to be the elite of the elite, but I can do the best that I can on any given day. And by giving it my all, I can maximize my fulfillment and my purpose, within whatever realm that I'm trying to maximize. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Critical Oxygen Podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your athletic potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson, and today we're joined by continuing guest host, Dr. Robbie Jacobs, where we're going to further our discussion of predictors of performance. Dr. Robbie Jacobs, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's it may not seem like a long time for you as listeners between conversations, but Dr. Jacobs and I took a week off from our last recording, and it really seems like a long time, for me. So, and we immediately got on and started talking. I was like, whoa. We need to pause and we need to, talk about our updates on the podcast so that people can kind of hear, what we're pursuing and, like what sort of cool things are going on in terms of our lives and physiology and everything like that. So that's why I paused him and then started from there. So here we are.
I forget what we were talking about now.
Yeah. So, so we were talking, we were talking about how essentially being an independent PhD person now, myself, it has its challenges, but also is really cool because being a PhD and being entrepreneurial minded, if you have things like social media following and, know people, you can essentially start to get connected with other people who then you can work with, and you can offer your skills as somebody with a PhD to then, potentially get things like equipment or, do collaborations and other things like that. So that's kind of what we were talking about. And, for those of you who don't know, my fiance and I are in the process of finishing buying a house. And then within that house, I am going to have access to a detached garage where I'm going to be able to set up, hopefully, we're talking about treadmills. Hopefully I'll be able to, talk to some people at Woodway and get a really nice Woodway treadmill, have all of my, like physiology equipment, testing equipment, all that sort of stuff all set up. And then I can start to actually test people at my house. That's kind of my goal right now, along with, the podcast and other things like that. So
you're never going to leave your house.
That's the plan. That's like, we live far enough away from town that it makes it like, just like kind of hard not to like want to go and get groceries and other things like that. But yeah, in all actuality, like I want my house, I want my area to be a place where I want to be. And being an entrepreneur allows me to live in a place that most people couldn't live, right? If you're commuting to a job and you have to commute an hour and a half each way, that's not really indicative of, in my opinion, like fulfillment and happiness. Cause you're always like, oh, well, I'm wasting like 3 hours a day driving to and from my job. It's like, well, I'm going to have the opportunity to be able to wake up in the morning and literally just like, walk to my recording area, do all my, say social media stuff, do all, podcast recordings, all from, that little library. And then, do all my meetings, for Moxie Monitor, do all my physiology consultations, all of that. And then I'll also have on the property, like a workout room in my house with a bike, so another thing that Robbie and I have maybe gotten a little competitive about is our bike training. So
I can't get too competitive because my ceiling is a lot lower than yours. So I could do a lot of talking, but probably couldn't back a lot of it up.
Yeah, but the fun thing is that especially with cycling, right? You're always really competing against yourself. And then every once in a while, it's fun to be like, hey, I just did this workout. You should give it a try. Right. And then see how somebody else does it. Right.
After we were done collecting data and you were like, put the bike up to 400 watts and I'm just going to see how long I could go for. You remember that? And it turned into like this interval where you were going at like 400 watts. That was insane.
Dude, I was in really good shape then. Like at the end of my master's,
how do you compare yourself now to that?
Uh, it's hard to say because I mean I'm certainly lower because I just don't do as much volume. Like when I was at the end of my
Mm.
masters, I was going every Saturday to Pikes Peak, and I was doing the incline between 1 and 3 times, plus all the times down.
Like one time you would go there and you do it 1 to 3 times in one day.
Yeah, yeah,
Really?
yeah. And most of my times were all like sub 40, which if you know times on the incline was actually pretty good. I think my
You know,
fastest time ever is like 24.
what's the record?
Way faster than that. Somebody ran it or something like that. Like they were able to just book it. But yeah, I don't know what the actual record is. It's definitely sub 20.
You know, they have since updated the incline and the rail, the train that goes up to Pikes Peak, and I
Okay.
think the buildings, the like what they have up at top Pikes Peak. They
Wow.
went to Swiss train authorities, the SBB, the SBB, and I'm pretty sure it's a Swiss. Well, at least they used Swiss consultants, and
Okay.
but I think the train may be Swiss as well that goes up there.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I just remember by the time I was leaving, the incline was just getting so busy that it was one of those things where it's like you either had to get there super early in the morning to do it or just don't go at all.
yeah.
Have they implemented any sort of like
How many people at
passes or
once?
anything? Yeah.
They were talking about it. I'm not sure. You know, surprisingly, I've yet to do the incline since I've moved to Colorado Springs.
You should do
That's
it.
one
That
thing
was
I can't believe I haven't done.
It's fun. It's it's one of those things where it's like, if you go too hard, you're gonna have a bad day.
Right.
And it's really easy because it starts off actually super gradual, but then it's essentially like a VO2 max test. Like, how when you explain a VO2 max test to somebody, you're like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just this increasingly harder and harder hill. It's like,
Yeah.
that's pretty much what the incline actually is. And it's like the real life version of it.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's fun though. So I was in super good shape during the end of my masters. And at that time too, being in the lab all the time and like kind of having access to all that equipment, I was like, yeah, let's just like test VO2 max. Let's test, my 3 minute power output. Like let's do all of this all the time.
Yeah.
I was in really, really good shape. When we were doing the ramp tests, I think the highest I ever got was like 450, maybe 475.
That's awesome.
I feel no,
That's big. That's a good max power.
it was pretty high. I want to say 475 seems too high. I definitely got into the 400s though. So like 425, maybe 450. Um now when I do now I do a longer ramp test. So
It's a lot lower.
it's 3 minutes. Yeah, it's 3 minutes steps, and they start at 60 watts and then go up 20 watts every minute. So it's more of kind of like an endurance sort
Right.
of step test. And
For sure.
it's my max power output isn't nearly as high. Like I think I
Right.
hit 300 towards the end of that test. And
How long
then,
does it take?
oh man, that was like, had to be like closer to like the 45-minute mark or something.
That's a really good point. When we focus on VO2 max, is like we should really discuss how the graded exercise protocol that you use so importantly can influence at least the power, right? The reciprocal power that is being monitored along with the changes in VO2. VO2 is probably going to be the same.
Yep.
But those longer duration ramp protocols is going to give a closer idea of like performance VO2, more what your VO2 would be if you were training. Whereas those faster ramps, like the 10-minute, I say faster, even though that's more standard, there's so much discoupling from the VO2 you're measuring simultaneously with a quick ramp versus if you went out and actually sat at one of those power outputs that was within the protocol and what the associated VO2 would be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's value in, the faster ramp
Both.
for, yeah,
Yeah.
for both. And
Yep.
but for me, now I'm like, okay, well, the shorter ramp is getting me, because with that shorter ramp, my quote unquote FTP, maximal lactic steady state, whatever you want to call it, is like 260. So, but I can only go to like 300. So I can only do like two steps above
But
that
that's how it
260.
should be. I mean, that's how
Yeah.
it really is, right? So once somebody is really at their maximal metabolic steady state, you're not going to be able to go much
Mm-mm.
further than that. So
No.
that's probably much more accurate. But you like to flex with a lot higher max power output, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It always feels better to be like, oh yeah, I hit, 425, than to be like, well, I only hit 300. And then you talk to people on the phone who are like, yeah, I just did a 20-minute like test and I was seeing threes for the whole time. I'm like, dude, that's insane.
Yeah, I would work with people that would, if they were didn't have a lot of time to exercise, they just go and do 400 watts for 20 minutes. I don't. I can even do that. I wonder if I could do it for a minute.
That's, and like we were saying, I think in the last episode, like holding a constant 400 is a lot different than if you're on like a fan bike where you can kind of modulate that a little bit. Like even
Right.
jumping like 390 to 410, like,
Right.
that's much more sustainable than just 400
Yeah.
all out. And it gets, as soon, when you're doing something in erg mode, as soon as that power decreases your cadence to a certain extent, it just feels like you're going through mud.
Yeah.
And then it's just all downhill from there. And you stop very quickly.
Yep. 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 Especially when you're in erg mode with a dirty chain.
Yes. Yeah. You don't want to have that excess, um, you know, resistance, right? And
Brutal.
that's that. I don't know if we've shared that on the podcast, but what Robbie was telling me is that he never knew that you had to actually clean your chain on your bike.
Yeah.
So,
It's
so what'd you
embarrassing.
do? You cleaned it, and then you gained what, like 20?
25, 30 watts back. But because I didn't clean it for 2 years. I rode bikes with my friends when I was younger, but I never rode like competitively or as a sport. And so if I ever had to take my bike in, I just took it into the shop and they fixed kind of everything collectively. I
Right.
never realized, and I don't ride outside, and so I'm riding indoors. So I didn't realize how dirty a chain can get just riding indoors. Oh boy, was I ignorant. Woo. But that entire 2 years, I was like, man, I just keep getting worse and worse and worse. I don't know what I'm
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. You're like, I feel like I'm pushing harder. Am I overtraining? What
Yeah,
am I doing?
that's
Like,
exactly what I thought. But then I actually looked at my training volume and it's going down. I was like, oh, great.
yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, have to.
Because
Oh,
that intensity, that relative intensity was going up, and you were
yes.
increasing the resistance on the bike. So, it's like
Yes.
you have to reduce your volume if your intensity is going up. Like,
Oh, it was terrible. It was an in-sum game. I was losing my mind. And
yeah.
then I cleaned it and I was like, I love cycling. This feels great. Feels like I'm riding on a cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is funny because, it's like we as researchers, people would be like, oh, you should know all this sort of stuff. And it's like, no, we research in very controlled environments, and we're doing all these things, and we know the protocols and we know the best practices for research. But when it comes to, say maybe the more applied side of things, like coaching ourselves or, implementing those training ideas, sometimes it's like, even like simple things, right? Like most cyclists would be like, oh yeah, just clean your chain, dude. Like,
Totally. Yeah,
and you don't realize it until you actually do it. And then you're like, oh,
exactly.
I
I wonder
should
what
have
else I'm
done
doing. That's ridiculous.
that.
I'm
I
sure that
wonder,
there's a handful of things.
have you ever done like a professional bike fit?
No.
Do you just kind of eye it and just, oh yeah, this seems pretty good. My leg
Yeah.
is at a certain angle,
I
like stuff
should
like that.
really I should really be fit. But who would you trust to do that?
Yeah, I mean, so when I got my first triathlon bike down in Georgia. There was, just like a company that does like bike fits. And I brought my bike in. Actually, no, I didn't even have to bring my bike in because they have an adjustable bike that like, does all the zoop, zoop, zoop sort of thing.
We have one of
And
those at the university.
well, then go do that.
I
And
don't
just
know
see
how
if
to
you
use
have...
how I don't know how to use it, right?
Yeah,
How, like,
you have to get somebody who actually knows like what
knows,
the heck
right.
they're doing. And yeah, so if you have like a biomechanics person or somebody who is
Or
like
Inigo
trained in
San
bike fitting,
Milan or
yeah, yeah,
or Steve Johnson, like two people intimately familiar with the world of professional cycling, I should ask them.
yeah, yeah,
But
you should
it's
say,
kind
hey,
of
do a bike fit
ridiculous.
on me.
They look at me and they're like, "What?" I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Sorry.
Yeah, like I just get on my bike and I just push the pedals. Like, come on, guys.
Exactly. I just stomp on them. Yeah,
Yep, yeah. Yeah, it is. It's like we try to use physiological principles in order
totally,
to get the
totally.
most out of
Yep.
everything. But it's still, it's it with anything, right? You start out and you don't really know much,
Right.
and the more you do it, the more you kind of figure
Yep.
out, and that's where like this is where kind of like the rubber meets the road in a sense, right? Where you're trying to figure out as an athlete how those training principles actually apply to your training, and then which ones work and which ones don't work for you, because that's also something, right? It's like, for me, when I was doing a lot of CrossFit, everyone's like, oh yeah, just go every day and you'll get better. And I was like, no.
And
I
then
can
you'll
do like,
break.
yeah, I can do like one hard workout a week.
Yeah.
And if I do any more than that, I'm setting myself up for injury, other things like that. It's kind of the same thing here, like with biking. It's a little less pounding, so you can get away with a little bit more.
Right.
But for me, it's essentially like I can do, will typically do a hard workout on Tuesday and a hard workout on Friday. And that's enough time for me to actually recover. And then in between, I'm doing, hour to an hour and 30 minutes of more of that zone 2 or recovery, sort of ride. But yeah, it is interesting because, there's so much literature out there that's like, this is the best way to do it. This is the best way to do it. But then if you actually try to apply some of those studies, it doesn't work that way. Like, for example, if you're trying to improve your VO2 max, we know that the best way to improve your VO2 max over pretty much anything else is to just do high intensity interval training every other day for 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But in all practicality, that doesn't work.
Right.
Because you eventually get tired. Like,
right. You don't look forward to it when when you're doing that every single day. I don't care how much you love the sport. It drains you. Like, even getting ready to do your intervals. I was like, oh, great. Like, you just know there's going to be 16 minutes here where it's going to hurt. Like, it's going to be uncomfortable. I oftentimes gag because I'll ride so hard. It's just my stupid competitive nature, I guess. I'll push myself to the point where I have to slow down and let a couple dry heaves pass before I can get back to it. And just, you have to prep yourself for that because it hurts, man. Like, you can, especially on the bike, you can take yourself to points where, like, my peripheral vision goes. It's weird. I noticed that I start shutting my left eye, actually, and squinting. It's so weird.
That was when I was on the rowing team at Michigan. We would do 2,000 meter erg rowing tests, and those were the single most painful, like, deepest into the well I have ever gone in my life, to the point,
really,
like you're saying, like tunnel vision, like the aperture is closing as I'm going, it's like 200 meters, 100 meters, 50 meters, 25, and that I really barely ever experienced in my running career, because I think there's so many things you're
that
you kind of having to be aware of.
You kind of have to stop. Right.
Yeah.
I'll puke. I can still puke. I can still gag easily while running, but it's not like I don't get the weird thing in my eyes and my peripheral vision doesn't start to go.
Yeah. I think on a stationary bike, it's kind of similar to that rower where you can just you can just push yourself to the limit and, because there's no consequences. Like if you pass out, you're not going to crash. But if you're on the road and you were going that hard,
Right,
like,
right.
and
You're ooh.
exactly. And I wonder too if that's like, if that's part of the reason why there's, obviously at the end of like a Tour de France stage, like they're going super fast. But I wonder
Right.
too if it's like they're going so hard that
Yeah.
they're kind of at those limits of control of their body.
Yeah, for
And then,
sure.
like just even little changes, right? You see people, get bumped up against the like the walls and, they're go over, or, like what the person who was always impressed with me was Peter Sagan. He would always be like kind of like, like elbowing people and fighting people and stuff, but they're going 40 miles an hour and he's like just able to stand up on his bike and like, nobody can knock him over. It's so impressive.
And scary. Did you watch that
Mm-hmm.
Netflix documentary about the 2022 Tour de France?
I don't think so. What's it called?
I don't remember. It's good though. But
I'll check it out.
who was that cyclist that there was a tour where at the end they were sprinting and he kind of got
Was
checked
it
into the wall?
Cavendish?
Is it Bob? I think it was Bob something. He broke several bones in his face. Like
Yeah.
it was bad.
Yeah. I just like, there's part of me is like, oh, it'd be really cool to start riding outside, riding on the road, doing those sort of things. And then I just remind myself of like, I know people who have had like parents get hit by a car and pass away. I've known people who have gotten in bike accidents. Like one of the guys I was just talking to yesterday, he was like, yeah, they had to like cancel a race because some construction worker decided he was going to drive his truck out into the middle of like this course. And then he was turning around and somebody hit him and died. And it's like all this crazy stuff. I'm just like, it's not worth it. Like
Right.
I would rather just let me just get fit on my bike. And like, I have a
Exactly.
little back walkway back here where
Right.
I just like can jump on my trainer.
Yep.
And I use a software called Full Gas. And it's really cool because they record like trails all around. Like, so if
Oh,
you wanted
really?
to ride like,
So you
yeah,
could
if you wanted to ride like the
watch.
Ironman bike course, you could literally go and ride that and you could ride all the elevation and it would change for you and all of that. So it's really cool. And, I actually, it's one of those things where, it's like, okay, well, I can be immersed in that sort of stuff. And I don't have to actually go outside, and it saves you time, right? Because then you're not stopping at every stoplight. You're not like, doing all that other stuff. So I don't know. I've always been more about performance than, kind of like the enjoyment
Me
of.
too. I get so much shit because I've ridden about 25,000 kilometers over the last about 3 years,
Mhm.
all inside. All inside.
Wow.
There's
That's a
not
lot.
a single kilometer that I have ridden outside. And I get so much shit. But just like you said, I don't have to worry about cars. I can just worry about performance, and it's time efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody blows up my workout other than me. I'm the only one that
Yep.
gets to blow up my workout, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I like that. I prefer that. And running, you could just go run outside if you want, right? That's great.
Right.
I actually started a tradition after recording. I tend to go for my weekly run.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do all my workouts. I'll ride throughout the week, except for I'll run 8K or about 5 miles once a week.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's nice, especially while the weather's good, because I do like being outside. Right, being
Yeah.
outside, getting the sun, that part I do really enjoy. It's just having to worry about people hitting you with their car.
Mm-hmm.
It's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine, you're living in Colorado Springs, which is a little bit busier. Like
Right.
I'm out here in the sticks. Like,
Right.
it's
Good and
so
bad, because
yeah.
less cars, but maybe they're not paying attention as much as somebody would be in the city because there's so much going on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. There's also something to say about people who drive like country roads and stuff, like don't respect cyclists as much as others. Like the really the only times I've ever been kind of accosted by somebody is when I'm riding on a country road and apparently I'm going too slow for them and they can't get over, even though there's nobody else for miles around. And they just yell at me when they go by and they get really close and they're just like, get the hell off the road. And I'm just like, dude, like, are you trying to kill somebody? Because that's a really easy way to do it. And I don't have to preach to the people on this podcast. I'm sure everybody understands is like, you know, a big truck hitting a small bike, that's a huge transfer of force and energy. And, you know, it's like, I just don't get why people get so upset about it. I do understand though, like when people like cyclists and all of that, you know, like don't follow the rules of the road and think they're better than stuff, it can get a little frustrating, but it should never be so frustrating that should like result in you being so mad that it would like you'd be willing to like hit somebody. That's ridiculous.
I was in Austin and I was driving around. It was a weekday, so everybody was going to work. It was around morning rush hour traffic. And I was going up this road where it didn't really have much side to it. It pretty much just dropped off soon after the lane ended. And there was somebody riding their bike on it and it was uphill. There were cars everywhere. I'm impressed with cyclists that have that much panache to just go out and ride at that time on that type of road.
Yeah,
I couldn't do it.
No, I can't either. And I used to train with a guy who's my neighbor, and he has since kind of done what you've done. Is he does all of his training inside. He does it all on Zwift. And, you know, has trained for like multiple Ironmans doing that.
Really?
And all this stuff. And the only time I think he actually like does stuff outside is when he's running or like a couple tune-up rides outside. But he knows too many people who have been hit by cars or, you know, have had, you know, negative effects from that he's just like, no, it's not worth it anymore. And
how did he say that the transfer? His bike performance during the triathlon, did it transfer well to Zwift?
That's a really good
transfer
question.
Well to him?
Yeah, I'll have to ask him. I mean, he's pretty sold on it. Like he hasn't changed his training. So, I mean, I don't think, like, I think if, you know, you just have to be aware, like how it does translate. So don't just do all of your training indoors and then go outdoors. But yeah, if it's one of those things where it's like, you feel more comfortable, it's less barrier to entry. I think that's the big one, right? Is the barrier to entry is so much lower by just always having your bike set up. All you got to do is just pick whatever ride it is. Like if you have a coach, they'll forward the workouts to you, or you can make your own workouts. And then, you know, and then you just do your training and then you get on with your day. You know, it's not like this huge, you know, thing where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go this route and you got to let your partner know that, you know, it's like, hey, if you don't hear from me in, you know, 2.5 hours, this is where I went. You know, sort of deal. That's what like my mom actually wouldn't let my dad ride outside anymore unless he told her where he was going.
Or took like an avalanche beacon.
Yeah, essentially.
Right.
Yeah,
I guess
or
that's
like just like the Find My iPhone.
Yeah, exactly. That's wild. I actually do remember hearing I can't remember the source, but I remember the source was legitimate because in my brain, I'm like, okay, I'm going to remember this. I'm pretty sure for most people that outdoor performance is better than indoor performance. But I think with most people that has to do with motivation. And lots of people struggle to be motivated inside, whereas I'm crazy. I don't know if that would translate perfectly for me because I can find all the motivation I want inside. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, that's another predictor of performance, right? Is motivation, and that's something that just like we're not going to touch on that because we're just going to assume that somebody is 100% motivated to do whatever it is they're doing at the time, right?
Yeah.
Like,
if you want to optimize your performance, there's a part of you that has to embrace the discomfort. You have to learn and be able to, and almost look forward to a certain extent of your ability to just sit in that hurt locker and embrace that discomfort. Because if you want to optimize your performance, that is definitely part of it.
Yeah. I think that's if you want to maximize your performance on any given day, right? That's really what you're trying to do
Yep.
is you have to be mentally strong
Yeah.
because at like there's definitely, physiological factors that could influence your psychology. But I also think like I've known people in the past who, they're just cruising along, and then all of a sudden they're just like, yeah, it got too hard and I stopped. I'm just like in my mind's eye, I'm just like, that's never an option. Like if I started a race, unless, yeah, like even when I broke my foot and I finished a 2-mile race in high school, like
What part of your foot broke?
it was one of my metatarsals. It
So is it
was,
just a stress fracture that was completely realized in the race? Probably.
yeah, probably. I think
Ah,
it wasn't quite a stress fracture at the beginning of the race,
right.
but at the end of the race, it
Right.
was a full break, right? And
Brutal.
then people thought I was just being, dramatic about it and stuff. So I ended up, training and doing other things like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's those injuries that will kill somebody because they'll get a little embolism, a
Hmm.
little part of the scab that develops once the bone actually breaks will break off. Active people dying from like a pulmonary embolism or a cerebral is actually pretty high. It scared me because our
Hmm.
department chair, Dr. Andy Sabuti, broke his foot trail running one day, and he came in and he said that he had developed a clot down there from it that they had to go in and manage. And I'd never even considered that before. But after that, lots of people in the department are saying, I know somebody, I know somebody, I know somebody that.
Mm-hmm.
So now every time I get a little injury like that, I'm like, oh, great.
Yeah.
Assess.
Yeah. It's,
You
it's
get
always
that
one of
all the
those things.
time.
Yeah. Well, so I was there when Dr. Sabuti came into the lab and used the
Right.
ultrasound
Yeah.
to,
When that
yeah,
happened, to
yeah,
see if because he was worried that he had a clot, and so he popped in, and we had the we had the
yeah.
ultrasound set up, and so he used it to identify. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
because I asked him, I was like, why are you in here? It's like 7:30 in the morning or something like that. He's like, oh, I'm just checking to see if I have a blood clot. I was like, what? A blood
Yeah,
clot? Like I
I
hope
remember
not. Like,
that.
yeah, it was pretty wild. And yeah, he just comes in, turns on the probe, puts a little ultrasound gel, and was just like looking around. I was like, oh, hey, well, what you doing there? Like,
I
just
remember
seeing what
that.
he's doing.
Hey, speaking of wild, what do you think about the new world record in the female marathon?
What is the actual time? Because I didn't see it.
Really? It, it's
No,
it,
I watched Elliot Kipchoge run, whatever he ran and crushed it. And then there was a video on YouTube that popped up that was like, oh, the craziest world record ever set. And I was like, I'll get to it later. So what was the time that she actually ran?
over. So she beat it by over 2 minutes. Oh, I wasn't looking, and I tried to look it up. My fingers weren't on the right keys.
Yeah, I I did that the other day. I was like,
But you know what came up is Elliot Kipchoge running, even though
yeah,
that's wild. Even though a single word, not a single word that I spelled was accurate, but that's still what popped up
that's crazy. Google can hear us. They know exactly what we're trying to get at.
4 days ago.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the Berlin Marathon is always fast, and Elliot Kipchoge won it for like the 5th time. He's like the first person ever to win 5 times.
really?
Yeah. And it's like it's been over the course like from like 2015 till now. So it's been over 8 years or something like that. It's not one of those things where it's like, oh, he just like has had 5 years in a row of like really really good running. It's like 8 to 10 years worth of being dominant in the sport.
Unbelievable. So I don't know how to pronounce her name. I'm not going to try. I'm going to sound ridiculous. But she ran it in 2 hours, 11 minutes, and 53 seconds to break the previous record that was set at 2 hours, 14 minutes, and 4
Wow.
seconds. So broke it by over 2 minutes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it was where was she from? Probably like Kenya or something like that.
Ethiopian.
Ethiopia. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, they like it's never really surprising to me when talent like that comes out of, one of those countries, because they have like running is their NFL, MLB, whatever you want to compare it to. So everybody is running constantly. And it's like, when you're a kid and going 6 miles to and from school each way, so 12 miles a day, it's a pretty good way of building up some
Right.
good endurance adaptations, right?
Right.
And then it's bred into the culture, like everybody wants to be a good runner, so then people are like, oh well, let's go do a running race, right? Or like they're like training for it already, or they have like all these training camps. And when you see all of these individuals running together, it's like a training camp of like 50 to 100 people. Like I don't know if this was in E10, which is like kind of like the Kenya mecca for marathon runner development. But there was a video I was looking at that was like, yeah, everybody in the village, or everybody in the town, whoever wants to come out can come and run this tempo run. And like sometimes they get 100 or 200 people to show up, but towards the end of it, you have like your top like 15 people, and then everybody else is kind of like super strung out. But it starts super super slow, and this is something that I think.
Well, what's super super slow?
No,
Super
it's
super
like
slow for
actually
them?
no, it's like actually slow. It's like
Oh.
it's like 8 to 10 minute, like 10-minute miles, something like that. So it's like, they're just trotting along doing their thing, and then it ramps up and it ramps up and it ramps up and it ramps up, and all of a sudden they're running 4:30 for a tempo. I guess it would probably be like 4:40. But that's what they run in. Like that's just how kind of like they're like culturally, they get together and do like those runs, whereas like we get together and we tailgate and drink beer
Yeah.
and all of that, and everyone's like, oh well, if only. It's like, guys, like it's not just genetics, like they're living and breathing it 100% of the time, and we're not.
Yeah. That is super impressive.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't realize it was like 2 minutes off of the world record. That's really impressive.
How did Kipchoge do? What was his time? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know what his time was. I think it was like 2:03 something. I think. And I mean, he didn't have anybody around him though, so he wasn't really being pushed. And I think it was like even after the first marathon, like first half marathon, he was already had dropped everybody. So he's just in a league of his own. He's crazy good.
I wish that I was good enough to qualify for just one marathon, so that for like the first, I don't know, maybe 1K. Now, probably not even. I'll just try to run with him.
There's even for 400 meters.
Yeah, I bet you I couldn't. I even for 200 meters, I want. Yeah, maybe.
You'd have to run essentially a 110 400.
Okay. Oh,
So
that would hurt. I couldn't do that.
So
Nope,
a 35-second 200. That's fast.
I couldn't do that. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
that's
so
fast.
amazing. That's so amazing because I'm not a couch potato. I mean, that is so brutal to think. And what hurts me even more is when I consider people like Elon Musk, because sure, I'm not gifted genetically to be physically impressive, but my prowess maybe comes more from my intellect. But then you see people like Elon Musk, and you're like, "Wow, I'm just a normal. I feel like a normal schmo, just
Yeah.
middle of the road,
Yeah.
everywhere and everything. Damn it."
No, I think one of the quotes that comes to mind is that comparison is the thief of joy.
That's true.
Because
That's good.
it
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 really
is one of
is.
those things where if you're always comparing yourself to others, and I mean in this world of social
True.
media, and
Right.
I mean I'm sure even within this podcast, I'm as soon as we start to release like the podcast episodes and stuff, I'm going to be comparing myself to, oh, are we trending upwards, are we trending downwards, like,
Sure.
oh, only 5 people listened to that episode, like I wish more people would listen, those sort of
Right.
things. And it's rough because I think especially in academia, it's really, really rough because you compare yourself to like those people that you're reading all their papers, right?
Right.
And you're
Right.
like, oh, well, like, oh, that's a great idea. I had that idea, but you didn't get it published.
Yeah.
And, so you're always kind of like almost right there, but you're not quite right there. And it's just brutal. And then you start to look at the people who are extremely successful in terms of academia, in terms of research papers, publishing, most of the time don't have good work-life balance. It's similar to, being an elite level athlete, right? Like you can't have necessarily good work-life balance. Like you have to be 100% invested in your work in order for it to work out. And it's the same thing with any sort of super high level individual, whether it's business, academia, athletics,
Totally.
sports, those sort of things. You have to have disbalance. But I think once you start to realize, hey, I'm probably not going to be the elite of the elite, but I can do the best that I can on
Yep.
any given day, and by giving it my all, I can maximize my fulfillment and my purpose, within whatever realm that I'm trying to maximize.
Exactly.
And yeah, and
Phil,
that's what the predictors of performance really are, is
totally.
being able to do that.
Would I, as your master's advisor, been able to do that interval
I
workout?
don't think so. I
No
don't think so.
way.
And
I could have
it's
done
crazy.
anything close
It's
to
crazy
that.
because how long was it between seeing each other? It was like almost 4 years that we
Yeah.
didn't see each other.
Yeah.
And when you were my master's advisor, it's like, yeah, okay, he might have a little bit of weight to lose, like those sort of
Oh,
things.
I
And then
had a lot of weight to lose.
I saw you at ACSM. I was like, where'd you go? Like,
Yeah. No, I lost at the biggest, like the most weight I lost 50 pounds.
nice.
As a little bit of it has come back. But as you said, I was on the track where I thought I wanted that academic success to reach that pinnacle of like preeminent, researcher in the field of, performance or mitochondrial physiology. And I realized soon after you left, like, that's not going to happen. I need to get back parts of my life that I've let go by the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
That really took away from my life quality. And
Yeah.
it was like a 2-year odyssey to kind of get it back. Because I wanted to
Yeah.
change a lifestyle so it was maintained, right? I didn't want to do anything drastic. I had to look forward to it. And so I built up my endurance, my resilience, my foundational basis over like a period of 2 years. And I'm doing things now that if then I would have said, that's what you're going to have to do in order to live this life, I would have been like, I don't want to do that. But incrementally got there to the point where when I was a PhD student, I used to talk with a good friend of mine now that he was doing his PhD too at the same time, Christoph Siebenmann. And we would say that we wanted to live a life where we could eat or drink almost whatever we wanted, but still maintain a healthy physique and be physically capable as we are. And so now I kind of just work out a lot more than I used to, but it's a priority. I love the opportunities it affords in life. It's good for self-esteem. It's good for your immune system.
Good for your mental health.
Exactly. And sometimes it really does take out some of the stresses of work and stuff like that, but it really helps regulate my sleep better, which I really struggle with. Like, it's so important. If people could find a way to fall in love with exercise, right? That's the thing is maybe not everybody's going to like riding a bike or even running, but if they fall in love and find that modality of exercise that they could spend a lot of time doing, that journey's well worth the investment for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's something that I'm slowly coming back to is, during the PhD, and I mean, you were finding it during early stages of your academic career, you feel pressure to kind of go all in on your job, on your research, on, whatever it is. And maybe it's not because you feel forced. Maybe you are forced because you have so many things that you have to do at one given time. For example, I was teaching during my PhD, I was doing research, I was taking classes, and so those three things, right, were already taking up my full-time job. And then on top of that, I wasn't being fulfilled from that. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to take on trying to do like make my own businesses. So I had like, two like sort of early businesses that I was trying to start. And then on top of that, I wasn't making enough money from my university job. So I had to work another job. So, I'm doing like 5 or 6 things. And, then the first thing to go is exercise, right? Because you're like, oh, I just don't have time to do it. Can't do it. But as soon as I started to be a little bit more selfish in terms of treating myself better, getting more sleep, exercising more regularly, and all of that, I was much more effective in all the things that I was trying to do. And weirdly enough, it seemed to free up more time for me versus taking away that time. So now that I actually get to choose what I do and choose how I build my day, I love having a routine. So I wake up, I make my coffee, I'll do like, social media stuff, like post, like try to do a little bit of work on, whatever project it is that I'm doing, whether that's like a course or ebook or whatever. And then when I'm done with that, I'm kind of like starting to get hungry. I'm like, okay, time to work out. So I'll go jump on the bike, for hour and a half. And then by the time that's over, then it's time to do, like record podcasts or,
When you're on your
have
bike,
meetings with people.
do you take in any nutrition on the bike? So at
Oh
this
yeah.
point, okay.
Yeah. So it's coffee, and then it's I essentially eat something on the bike every single day. So this is a little controversial because ketones are a little controversial in terms of their performance benefits, but I'll do that. Like I'll take like a bottle of like 10 grams of ketones just to stave off hunger for a little while. Then once I'm like 30-ish minutes into the workout, like, done my warm up and like kind of started cruising, I almost always do a packet of Maurten with some electrolytes. And it's essentially for me just to stay on top of my caloric intake. And I'm not doing like intermittent fasting for, the health benefits. It's like, cause there's no touted health benefits that have actually been shown in humans. And we should make a podcast episode about that.
Should.
But I just, that's just how it just feels better for me. Like I feel clearer when I'm, not focused on just eating right away. I feel like my blood glucose and other physiological regulation is better when I, start eating during my workout versus eating before.
What's
And
Maurten's?
Maurten is like, here, let me grab one. So it's just a little packet. It's like a drink mix. And this has 80 grams of carbohydrate in it. So I just dump this into a shaker
Which
bottle
is
of 500 milligrams
not,
of water.
Well, I guess that's pretty good. Yeah, that is pretty.
Yeah.
Well,
So essentially I'm like kind of training my gut as well to handle, higher loads of carbohydrates.
which is
so
good.
if I do want to do something longer, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
But your liver glycogen is always, but I guess then you're offsetting it with the exogenous carbohydrate you're taking in. Do you ever do any workouts where you are liver, skeletal muscle loaded?
I think typically yes. So the other day, yeah. So and my performance is way better.
Yeah.
So
I
the
bet.
other day, I did not have time to do my workout right after kind of doing my initial stuff. So I had a smoothie and like bomb smoothies. Like you just do frozen mango, strawberries, and blueberries, and then you put kefir. So it's essentially low fat kefir with some water. That's like turbo octane. Because when I got on the bike, I was like, man, I'm going 160, like 160 watts. My heart rate is like 5 or 10 beats per minute lower than it normally is during during these
I
workouts.
bet.
So yeah, so but it's not hindering like my workouts hugely.
Right.
And by taking in, exogenous glucose, I'm able to kind of override any sort of, fatigue related factors.
Do you know what, let's say, what composition of carbohydrate and how much you can take in without feeling any discomfort?
I haven't tested it in a while, but when I was doing my 50K training, I was trying to do 100 grams of, I think, what is this? This is a mixture
Probably
of glucose and fructose. And I think it's probably pretty ideal, whatever the ratio is, like
two to
0.0,
one
like
or
0.8
whatever,
or
or
whatever.
point
Yeah.
0.8 to 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
Morton's
Yeah,
is
I was
Morton's
upwards
good.
of like 100, 110.
Really?
And
And
yeah,
no problems.
nope.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it was, and that's like, I think it's super important to be focused on your carbohydrate intake, especially if you're in a situation like me where I'm doing, 100 and, an hour and 30-ish minutes of work in the morning without eating anything. And exercising close to fat max. We know that fat max is not 100% fat burning. It's, a lot of fat, but it's still a lot of carbohydrates as well. So, you're going to run into issues if you are always doing fasted workouts in that sort of capacity. You'd have to go lower if you wanted to actually, not have to worry about it as much. But yeah, then after that, I'll do, in terms of eating, I'll try to get in a lot of protein. Like, I think like 70 plus grams of protein. And it's like mainly coming from like protein shake, sort of deal. But then on top of that, I have, this is like, people don't follow my diet. Just,
Yeah, don't
you know,
same if I said what I eat
yeah,
too, for
but
sure.
I'll do, so I have like mass gainer and it's got a lot of maltodextrin in it. So essentially just like, glucose chains, but I'll do only one scoop of it. Normally they say, oh, 2 scoops, but one scoop is like 120 grams of carbohydrates. And that doesn't bother my stomach. Neither does like the 75 grams of protein that I'm consuming. So those two don't bother my stomach. It's a way of me, kind of refueling after the workout. And then I'll do, generally like a smoothie, like the smoothie I was talking about. And so I just eat a lot of, fairly high carbohydrate, and then mainly, so depending on the time of day that I'm eating, like I'll do like a sandwich or, something like that with some like goldfish crackers and some vegetables. I'm a child. And then I'll do like an actual good meal, for dinner. Like that's kind of like just how I operate. And it's my, like the last time I got all my, blood glucose, lipids, all that sort of stuff, everything was all good, because I'm still probably eating in a caloric deficit most of the time. And that's, if you ask my former PhD advisors, that's probably the best way to have good blood markers, is just be in a caloric deficit for a few days before you get your blood drawn. I'm not telling you guys to go out and do that, but if you are worried about it,
That's what I do too. I make
yeah,
sure anytime I have to go in to get my blood drawn, not only have I been exercising those days, but I am definitely in a significant caloric deficit.
yeah, yeah, because they do definitely, it helps regulate your blood glucose. It helps regulate triglycerides, within, or yeah, triglycerides, like with your LDL and HDL and all of that. Um, and it's just one of those things like that's something doctors should be asking people. Oh, like, have you been weight stable? Are you losing weight? Are you gaining weight? Because if you're gaining weight, I can almost guarantee you your numbers are going to be skewed towards the worst end of things, versus if you're in the process of losing weight. But that's this episode has been a kind of a large digression from the initial planned predictors of performance, but I think this has been fun because we've been able to explore like how we as researchers actually like train, the type of food and everything we're intaking, and then just, a little bit of like what it's like to be a researcher and get your life back when you actually choose that being
Yeah, for sure.
living is better than just your career, right?
Yeah, and it's important. And with the knowledge, that you discuss on this podcast, it will allow others to hopefully grab their own independence and you know, achieve what we're talking about is finding your optimal performance in life and in
Mm-hmm.
whatever shape form that comes in. um it will be significant in someone's life once they're able to do it.
Yeah.
Like right now, and no bullshit, like I know lots of people say this type of stuff even though they don't mean it, but my exercise is legitimately one of the stabilizing foundations of my life. Like
Mm-hmm.
it allows me to take on more, to be more, to do more, um, sincerely and with all sincerity. It really does. I never before, um, when I was younger, I was fit really because of like what Kevin Spacey said in American Beauty. I just wanted to look good naked. But since getting it back, now it's a different thing. And a
Mm-hmm.
little bit for me is because with the research, I mean, how long have I been discussing cycling without any understanding of the actual modality of exercise itself? So
Mm-hmm.
as I've started cycling more and more and more, it literally has made me a better researcher because I understand the mode of exercise that I study so often. It
Mm-hmm.
helps really kind of answer some of the questions that before I would have had no idea about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is kind of the awesome thing of taking on, whatever modality it is you're studying, because then you start to think, okay, coming back full circle to this idea of optimizing everything, and you and I not being kind of that, like that genetic ceiling of potential, is like, okay, what can I actually do to optimize my training in order to maximize my performance? And that's something I've been thinking a lot of. Like, we were texting the other day about, like 3 thresholds and, like determining your zones. And, that got me thinking about, like, well, why isn't everybody doing physiological testing? And, and then from there, it's like, okay, well, how do we actually bring more physiological testing into more homes and stuff? And I'm really, really excited. I think this episode should come out after an announcement that Moxie Monitor is going to make, but we're doing something really cool that's going to involve essentially using the Moxie, teaming up with a group of individuals over in Germany, and being able to basically just take a Moxie monitor, a heart rate monitor, and a stationary bike like a Wahoo Kicker, and then do essentially a step test and get all your physiological variables and your zones just from that. You don't have to go into a lab. You don't have to do anything. It's everything is fit to a really well done physiological model. And from there, you can start to actually get your physiological training plan versus, just using your traditional heart rate variables and other things like that. So everything kind of comes back around, and it's interesting because I didn't think getting into this podcast it would be, kind of like life optimization stuff, but I do, just to reiterate Robbie's point, is like, I do think that exercise is a very key foundation to maintaining health and maintaining wellness, and kind of optimizing your or maximizing your potential for whatever it is you're doing, because you only get one body and you only get one life, and you need to treat yourself with happiness and respect. And as soon as you can start to do that, and then start to figure out what it is actually brings you happiness and what makes you feel better, then you're going to start to exude that sort of positivity around you, and then you're just going to get it back tenfold. And maybe the start of that is exercise. I'm not saying you need to be a cyclist like us. I'm not saying you need to be a runner. Just doing something that gets you out and does something that just makes you better every day. Disc golf was that for me for a while. Maybe it's gardening, maybe it's I don't even know, like ski joring.
It is
like
landscaping. Landscape.
Yeah.
I love landscaping. And like right now in my middle age, ass enjoys landscaping more than resistance training now.
Yep.
Can you believe that? I used to resistance train 20 years of my life consistently.
Yeah.
Never thought that I would find more enjoyment in going outside and digging trenches sometimes.
Hey, if
than
you're
pushing weights around.
Yeah, if you're really enjoying that, you should come out to Michaela and I's new house. We have
lots of work that needs to be completed.
We have a yurt that you can stay in.
Yeah.
And we need some T-posts and a fence put up, and I'll be glad to help you with that.
Hey,
but
I could show you pictures of we had a massive windstorm. I think you were here one time. Like the wind here gets wild. It blew over a tree in our backyard and took out half the fence. And then the rest of our fence was taken down for other reasons I can't talk on this podcast. But I had to rebuild a portion of the fence. It was good. It's good. I can help.
No offense. Yeah, and I'm kind of joking, but at the same time, I'm like, actually though, because like it's gonna be tough. We live on, or we're gonna be living on kind of like a rock shelf, so we're gonna have to drill some holes to get the T-post in deep enough and all that.
Yeah, our property's on all kinds of sandstone, so we're running into the exact problem. Actually, the 40-year-old retaining wall that we previously had was anchored into the sandstone with these cables that it's not done anymore, but it lasted for 40 years. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah it's so at the end of the day, right, it's just about finding stuff that you love to do, putting yourself in a situation to just get better every day. And it's like I said, this is a digression from what we initially planned on talking about, but I love these sort of conversations, and this is exactly why I just love these conversations with Robbie, and that's why I had such a good time in my master's, because we would just sit down and we would just talk about this sort of stuff. So if you guys have any comments, questions for us, leave a comment down below. If you're on YouTube, reach out to me at Critical02 on Instagram, and until the next time, we'll catch you guys later.